I don't want to be dramatic, but I feel like I have been training my entire YouTube career for this moment. Maybe even my entire life. That's how much I back myself to have a good shot at this, because I have read an entire book prize shortlist and I'm going to try to predict the winner. These are the shortlisted books for this year's Booker Prize. We have Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, This Other Eden by Paul Harding, Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein, Western Lane by Chetna Maru, If I Survive You by Jonathan Escoffery, and The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. And here's the thing, let me just tell you, every time a book prize announces their shortlist, I tell myself, because I am delulu, that I'm going to read all of them before the prize is announced so that I can basically just feel involved. I just get FOMO, honestly. But prizes like the International Booker Prize, the Booker Prize, the Women's Prize often lead me to my favorite books of the year when I do read the books on their shortlists, because they have great selections that are challenging, thought-provoking, fascinating, and diverse. And so I always tell myself, this is the year that I managed to read the entire shortlist. And I never do until now, baby. We finally did it. We did it, Joe. Normally I just get distracted. I read other things. I'm a boy with the attention span of a TikTok, okay? But here's the thing, this year it's personal because I was very, very kindly asked to host this year's official Booker Prize live stream. Like, what? This is honestly one of the biggest honors of my whole life, my whole career, and I'm filming this the day before the live show, but when you're seeing this, it will have actually happened, and I could literally pee everywhere with excitement, because this is just a dream come true. I'm not posting this until after the awards have happened because I don't want to show any bias towards any of the authors when I'm literally going to be meeting and interviewing all of them. And I feel like that's just professionalism and human decency, right? So when you're watching this, the show would have already happened. I'll show you some highlights on the screen now, but I'm going to be interviewing last year's winner, Shehan Karuna Talaka, who won with The Seven Moons of Marley Almeida. I'm going to be interviewing Katie Hessel, who wrote The Story of Art Without Men, as well as Ajoa Ando, Alfred Enoch, Catriona Belf, Dakota Warren, and we have some really cool actor readings from each of the books. Appearances from the Queen, Dua Lipa, and also the actual Queen, Camilla, and then eventually the winner will be announced live. And for some reason, I am being trusted to be in charge of that. And so the official stream will be available for you to watch now on the live tab on my channel. But anyway, I did do my homework, and at this moment in time, the winner has not been announced, so I'm going to try and predict who I think it will be. I read these 6 thought-provoking, challenging books from around the world, and I'm going to rank them from favorite to least favorite, as well as sharing my reviews and reasoning. So, let's go. Number 6 for me, and therefore my least favorite of this brilliant list, is If I Survive You by Jonathan Escoffery. This book is a series of interlinked short stories about the diaspora and existing between two identities, essentially. Existing between two states, America and Jamaica. While we follow a few members of this community, and specifically of one family, the center of gravity of the novel is this boy called Trelawney. He was born in Miami to Jamaican parents, and then he goes to school in the Midwest of America before returning to Jamaica. And he always feels kind of dislocated in some capacity, no matter where he is, because in some areas he's considered too black, and in other areas he's considered too white, or not black enough. In America, he's the Jamaican, and then in Jamaica, he's the American. And so it thinks about what that does to a person and how you identify yourself when no one else seems able to identify you at all, when no community is taking ownership of you. And so it chronicles the gruesome and the hopeful moments in these people's lives with a range of different styles and tones. And I do think it is an interesting exploration into attempted assimilation and then ultimately the feeling of being ostracized. The way this character, Trelawney, feels like a perpetual other, no matter where he is. So a great concept. However, for me, this book just felt a little bit didactic, I think. It felt like something that should have been creative non-fiction. It felt like it should have been a memoir that was done in a creative way rather than presented as fiction. This felt like a set of creative personal essays rather than a story per se. I don't know if the novel short story hybrid worked very well in this case because I just didn't connect with one particular character, and that just made it feel not very cohesive or captivating. You know, I struggled to keep wanting to actually pick this up. It felt kind of like a list of different scenarios, whereas in the novel form, if we were just to follow one character from like a first-person perspective, we would see the way that microaggressions permeate real life every single day, and how systemic issues and those microaggressions build up over time to just wear someone down. So I felt like the format of this book was what kind of let it down. I think the points he had to make were important and powerful and meaningful, but the way that he delivered them wasn't. And he talks about the importance of telling stories like this. On page 40, he talks about the necessity of personal anecdotes, of personal experiences, and why we need to share them. A census tells us the what, but not the why. But even if we have the why, let's say wealth disparities resulting from the discriminatory housing practices, we still wouldn't have the humanity that's essential to conveying the real message that human lives are the ones at stake. That, I think, is perfectly put. That is why it's so important that instead of just only exclusively reading articles and history books that outline statistics and facts and figures, it's also really important that we have fiction, that we have books, that we have memoirs, that we have stories, that we have essay collections from people who have experienced these things, so that we get personal anecdotes, personal experiences, so that we see the humanity. However, I just wasn't sure that this particular book was executed completely effectively, to be as poignant as it had the potential to be. I worry that in trying to do too much, this book did too little, and so for me it's not like a prize-winning book, although I am glad that I read it. I think maybe because there are books like Girl, Woman, Other that do the interconnected short story thing better than this, and then there are also books like Americana who do the one-person perspective of the diaspora in a more cohesive way. So for me, a prize-winning book has to be the best at what it does, and this book isn't for me. So that's why this is in sixth for me. It didn't blow me away or push the envelope enough. And so my fifth favorite book was this one. This is Western Lane by Chetna Maru. And this is tricky for me because this is a good book, but is it the best book of 2023? No. Is it experimental and unique in its approach? Yes, but is it mind-blowingly good and better than any other book this year? No, it's not. And so that's why it doesn't rank higher in my list. This is a story about grief, a portrait of a family, daughters who have lost their mother, and a father who has lost his wife. And what's interesting about this is that instead of discussing grief in a direct, straightforward way, instead we talk about the sport of squash. It is a book about a father teaching his daughters how to play squash. And there's a really interesting section, actually the kind of opening pages of the book. And what she talks about is thinking about the echo of the shot that you make in a game of squash. She says that's the most important thing to listen to, the echo of what you perform. And I thought that was really interesting because this book really does think about the reverberations of one event. So in this metaphor, I guess, if you think of someone dying as the moment the racket hits the ball, what we're focusing on over the course of this book is the echo of that event. So the reverberations, the people who are left in its wake, the people who have to now recover and survive and move on. And that is this family who are trying to exist amidst the chaos. They're learning to find space in a chasm. They're learning to survive in a period of grief. And the way that the games of squash are described, usually at the beginning of each chapter, there's a kind of movement, a choreography on the court. That is also telling us the story of how these people are maneuvering amidst their grief, amidst these huge feelings, amidst these really difficult times. And so these games of squash tell us about their struggles and their emotions and their movements, and I thought that was really interesting. Such a unique approach. At just 160 pages, this is a quick read, but it's bold, it's wise, it is deeply human. But did it stand out to me? Out of all of these books, you know, that I've read, did it stand out to me? Not especially. I think I just felt a little bit lukewarm about this one, but I have to say, for a debut novel, this is a huge achievement, and I will definitely be reading Chetna Maru's next book. I cannot wait to see what else she delivers to us. I mean, having your debut novel be nominated for the Booker Prize, be on the shortlist, is so huge. What a way to kind of enter the literary landscape and make your mark, so I definitely can't wait to see what else she writes. Now, all of that aside, on a completely superficial level, this has nothing to do with Chetna Maru, this has nothing to do with the contents of this book, and it does not impact my ranking on this list. Let's be real, that is the ugliest book cover I've ever seen in my entire life. Please, it's like they were trying to do a Normal People can of sardines thing, but just made it terrible. Did they design this with their eyes closed? What colorblind person chose to put purple and orange on the cover of this book and then a black and white photo? Who did this? Who is responsible for this crime against design? And my second question is, how dare they? How dare you do this to my girl Chatno? This could have been great with some kind of squash iconography. Like, the potential of this is huge. In fact, I think the US cover is considerably nicer. I pray this gets a nicer paperback cover because this is, it's frankly an atrocity, and I'm upset. Okay, pettiness over, on to the next book. Now let's dive into The Pools. This Other Eden by Paul Harding, the first of 3 Pauls who were shortlisted for this year's prize. We have to acknowledge this elephant in the room. The elephant is probably named Paul, because I understand some people were like, wow, this shortlist has more people called Paul than women on it. This must be rigged, this can't be right. Now let me ask you a question. If you were going to rig a book prize, do you not think you might do it subtly? Do you not think you might do it with a bit of discretion? Having 3 out of 6 of the authors on the shortlist being called Paul could only possibly be coincidence, because no one in their right mind would choose for that to happen. You know, finally, some Paul representation on the Booker Prize. I'm calling this year the Apocalypse, because we have got Pauls coming out of our ears, and listen, I will defend the Booker Prize here, because this is always one of the most diverse, inclusive, global, international prizes. It is so representative of the literature that is happening in English all around the world. And so I am gonna give them a pass on the fact that we have 3 Pauls on the shortlist, and 3 Pauls in my top 4 as well. This is This Other Eden, which has such a brilliant concept. And I actually heard that the author was just doing some research and stumbled upon this concept, this idea, this piece of history, and just became obsessed with it. And now we have this book, which I'm really impressed about, because my hyperfixations are nowhere near this productive. Mine just lead to a new, weirdly curated TikTok For You page algorithm. Like, for example, right now, my whole feed is just videos of people making really teeny tiny things. Like, someone made a teeny tiny chair, it's so small, and someone else made like a library, but it's like this big, and they're just adorable, and I love them, and every time I see them on my feed, I'm like, oh my god, not another teeny tiny thing, and then I watch it in its entirety, and that is why my whole For You page is those videos. But anyway, I digress. This Other Eden is based on a real story of an island called Malaga Island, which is just off the coast of Maine. And in 1912, the 47 residents of Malaga Island were displaced, forcibly removed from their small interracial community. With a small community like that, you gotta think of it in the same sense of like Eden in the Bible, which I think is why the book gets its title. Small communities have to procreate in order to continue the bloodline of their family, of their community. And so on this island, there was a lot of procreation amongst a very small community of people. And so eugenics experts and scientists intervened and said this wasn't okay, this wasn't allowed. And they have since had to apologize. The state of Maine has apologized for the way they forcibly removed these people from what is their home. And so the book thinks about what it would be like on this island, on this other Eden. We're introduced to the ways in which the first formerly enslaved man arrived on the island with his wife, how they settled there, and then we go on to see the history of the island, the kind of lore of the island, how this community develops, and the way that people of all different races, ethnicities, and backgrounds coexist peacefully on this island. They have integrated in more or less perfect harmony, and we just see what day-to-day life is like for them at the beginning of this book. Then we cut to a scene where we're seeing academics discussing this island and how the lens of science and anthropology totally dismisses the humanity, the real lived experiences of these people, these individual islanders. And so it is ultimately decided that these people should not be allowed to inhabit this island because the way they are procreating is deemed problematic from a eugenics standpoint. And this of course provokes a myriad moral questions for the reader. One boy on the island in particular is heralded as this kind of young prodigy, and so he is taken away from the island and put into school for what outsiders perceive to be a better future, and then we see how this boy actually experiences those things. This is a book exploring the arrogance of certain people who disrupt communities, how certain people felt that they had the right to kind of play God in these scenarios, and how they disturb and displace people who are just minding their own business. So the themes in this book are so interesting. This was a huge yes from me. So up my street. Even now I'm describing it to you guys, I'm like, damn, that's a really great concept. That is really good. And I do think this book has the potential to be like studied in schools. Are you ever so down bad for a book that you think, I want to write an essay about this? That's incredible. But on a subjective level, from a reader's perspective, the writing style of this book just wasn't really for me. I think it felt a little bit too tightly controlled. It didn't feel that modern. I didn't feel like it had much personality. I know it's kind of meant to be lyrically written, but it didn't really connect with me. It wasn't quite embellished enough for my liking. And I didn't really find it massively engaging either. I felt that the book kind of kept me at arm's length, which I didn't love. It opens with the first page is sort of just this info dump of backstory, of exposition. I hate that. I hate when we're sort of just given like a list of characters and it's just too much dropped in your lap too soon, because that doesn't feel very immersive for me. So I found that a real hurdle and something that was very frustrating. And so with a few edits, a few structural edits, and maybe a slightly different writing style, this could have been a new favorite for me, but it just wasn't. And we have to, you know, look at the material that we've been given rather than what we want it to be. And so for me, when taking into account my reading experience, this was a bit of a slog. I found this difficult to get through and I am gutted about that. So that's why it only ranks 4th in my list. Before I talk about the next book on my personal list, I just wanted to let you know that today's video is very, very kindly brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform for building your website or online brand. They have hundreds of incredible templates, so you don't need any coding experience, you don't need to be an expert web developer. You can just bring your vision to life using a template as the perfect starting point. And there are also great features, including being able to make an email mailing list. You can create a blog to share what's going on behind the scenes. There are great analytical tools. Everything you could possibly need, all in one place. So if you would like to build your website, you can actually get a free trial over at squarespace.com, have a play around, see what you like, see how you can do it, see what works for you, and then when you're ready to launch your beautiful new website, you can use the code jackedwards at squarespace.com/jackedwards to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. You're welcome. But now, in at number 3, and I think this is an incredible achievement, Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein. This book ran intellectual rings around me, and I kind of loved it. I can't lie. This book slapped me in the face and called me an idiot, and I was here for it. This is ostensibly a story about an unnamed woman who arrives in an unnamed northern country to work for her brother, and the local people just hate her. They cannot stand her. And that leaves her feeling like a total outcast. She struggles to speak their language, she finds it impossible to integrate herself into this community, and ultimately this is an allegory for the feeling of being marginalized. There are lots of suggestions too that this is specifically a Jewish experience of anti-Semitism, because there are lots of allusions to that, but also this is so deeply textured. I think the second time you read this, you would pick up on even more. And I will say this is an incredibly difficult book. The language is tough. I had to sit there with a dictionary to research a lot of the words that are used in this book because it uses very, very obscure language at times. The vocabulary in this book is immense. The style, the prose is deeply complicated with really long, meandering sentences. You know, this is a really sprawling book. Each individual sentence is meticulously crafted, and so though the book is really short, you really have to linger on each word, on each sentence to make sure it's gone in. Whereas a book like Western Lane, for example, uses very accessible language. This is deeply complicated, and on a craft level, it is incredible. It is a tough, slow read, but so rewarding. So rewarding, and so worth it too. Like I said, I would love to read this a second time. I think it would be even better. It is a haunting meditation on life at the margins, and such a singular achievement. I really loved this quote right here, and this is all one sentence, by the way. And so we tramped daily through the woods, feeling for once in the world. I told myself over and over that I must remember this moment, here, now. A moment which could not last, and would inevitably be followed by an unhappiness that would be commensurate with, if not exceeding it in strength, and that I must therefore carry it with me. The knowledge that once, for a time, for a series of hours, even stretches of days, I had seen what happiness might look like. That would have to be enough. Wow. So we're into really strong territory here with these books, but this could have been my winner in another year. But the next 2 books are just exceptionally good. So, drum roll please. My number 2 is Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. This is about a kind of dystopian version of Ireland, where there is a totalitarian state. I would say this probably comes under the realm of speculative fiction. I think that would probably be the label you would put on this. Like, it's very speculative about what a dystopian totalitarian island could look like. There's been this unspecified disaster that has led to this style of government, of rule in Ireland. Now, Prophet Song opens with a woman in her house hearing a knock at the door in the dead of night. And that scenario is exactly what this whole book feels like as a reading experience. It is the paper version of a knock on the door at the middle of the night, because the book itself is disorientating, it's terrifying, it makes you feel very vulnerable and exposed in a way, just like our character does, and it's basically about the lengths that this one woman will go to protect her family. It's a book about resistance, about resilience, about rebellion, but it's also a book about survival and love and how we get through the darkest of times. And there's one quote that just knocked my socks off, like, my feet are chilly now because this knocked my socks off. And I think it's something that we all need to hear right now. You know, this really feels like a book for 2023. It feels like a book that listens to what the world is going through and writes it down. History is a silent record of people who could not leave. It is a record of those who did not have a choice. You cannot leave when you have nowhere to go and have not the means to go there. You cannot leave when your children cannot get a passport. Cannot go when your feet are rooted in the earth, and to leave means tearing off your feet. Just take that in for a second. That floored me. That took my breath away, because it speaks to right now so articulately and eloquently and perfectly. It also reminds me of one of my favourite poems, Home by Wharton Shire, which grapples with the same ideas of what it must take for people to have to leave, but also the feeling of not being able to at all. And I think that is especially relevant because this definitely takes inspiration from the situation in Syria, but also rings true to the genocide in Palestine that is happening right now. It feels monumental, it feels like a book of our time, of today, of right now. Prophet Song is essential and urgent. It feels like a book we all need right now. It is this real block of text and it is bleak. It is really, really devastating and horrible to read, quite frankly, but I loved it. I gave this 5 stars. I would be so happy, elated even, if this book won the Booker Prize, and I actually think it will, because I do think when you look at the history of the prize, this is a 2023 winner. You know, when we look back in future years, I think that this would make sense as the book that won in 2023 specifically. However, I do have a personal favourite on a personal level, the book that I think is one of my new favourite books of all time. I mean, Prophet Song is 100% easily one of my favourite books of the year, and also up there with the best books I've ever read. But for me, this is just a little bit higher, and I cannot stop thinking about it. I haven't stopped thinking about it since the second I put it down, and that is The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. In fact, when I read the book's closing lines, I had to like throw this down on my bed with my head in my hands, and I had goosebumps all over my body. I had shivers, and it's just the perfect novel for me. I am failing to find a single flaw in it. The Bee Sting is an Irish family saga about a pretty ordinary nuclear family unit. It's about a father, a mother, a daughter, and a son, and we see all of their perspectives. In a way, this sort of reminded me, I think it's in the same realm as The Promise by Damon Galgut, which also won the Booker Prize and is one of my favourite books ever. I just think in the way that it explores different perspectives and builds them up over the course of the novel, I think that's why I would find a similarity there. But we open with the teenage daughter's story, her perspective, her point of view, which is witty and funny and deals with her world in a way that is non-judgmental, I think. It talks about being a teenager in a very empathetic way, where of course there are situations that feel frivolous and silly and daft, but when you're a teenager, they are your whole world, and they do mean everything to you. And I think he captures that perfectly. And in these early chapters where we're hearing from the children's perspectives, they talk about their parents as these kind of caricatures, as these very one-dimensional figures of mum and dad, because that is how the kids view them. But then when we see the parents' perspectives, we're given the texture and the substance of their history, of their stories, of their perspectives. And so the story sort of layers over time to create something that is just delicious and incredible. The Bee Sting is a book about the butterfly effect and the seemingly small moments in our lives that have huge lifelong effects, you know, a ripple effect, a domino effect in our lives. The bee sting in the title is the perfect example of a moment that is perceived one way by some people and an entirely different way by other people. And it's all about the stories we are told and how the truth is bastardized as it's passed along by different people, how gossip spreads and how rumors, impressions, interpretations of events change what really happened as the story is passed from person to person. And I enjoyed the way this contemplated how the truth is muddied and blurred and obscured through the stories that we tell each other, and also at times the stories that we tell ourselves. This is a huge novel. It's like 700 pages, and you all know I have big book fear, but the pages in this book practically turn themselves. You get so lost in the story, and also the pacing is great because the first individual perspectives are quite long while we get to know the characters, and then it speeds up over time, and it really does feel like the book is spiraling, and ultimately it sort of spirals out of control, but the author has a perfect grip of it at all times. And so we build up to this kind of crescendo of action whereby at first each character is given a whole section, and then as we get further through the book, at this point the perspectives begin to sort of bleed into one another until eventually each character is just giving us one line each. And without spoiling anything, just as it gets super intense and we reach this huge climactic moment, we stop and we just have this one page with one line. It is for love. You are doing this for love. Right, I'm out. That, to me, is perfect. On a craft level, standing ovation. This is phenomenal. It is a masterclass in storytelling. Experimental in all the right ways. One character, Imelda, is written without punctuation, and that shows us how she has completely lost control of her life, how she has lost structure, she's lost routine. Her sentences lack order and refinement because her life has kind of slipped through her fingers. And the other really interesting theme in this book is the climate crisis, which is referenced throughout and is a huge motif. And there's also this feeling of inevitability of the climate crisis. And I think that adds to the feeling of inevitability of what happens to this family as well. I loved this. I loved it so much. And I just can't stop thinking about it, truly. It's funny, it's witty, it packs such a punch. Yeah, this is a sucker punch of a novel and I devoured it. This for me is one of my favorite books of the year. It's glorious, it's heartbreaking, it's astonishing, it is a remarkable achievement, and so for me, this is my personal winner. But I really think this year it is a two-way race. It's a two-way battle between these two books, and while this is my personal winner, I think that this might take home the prize, because this for me is just a winning book, whereas this is like a 2023 winning book. So we will see what happens. There's definitely some overall themes on this shortlist. I mean, they're all pretty bleak. They're all pretty sad. Contemplating the state of the world, they deal with grief and family and displacement, dislocation, feeling like an outsider, feeling like you've lost control of your life and your surroundings and maybe your community too. The Bee Sting really is the only book that kind of has some comedy to it. The rest are pretty miserable, I have to say, and I kind of like that. This definitely feels like a 2023 shortlist, and so for me, that's why I think this is a 2023 winner. I would be totally happy if either of these books won, or Study for Obedience. I think that could be a kind of upset win. I think that could be, this is kind of the dark horse of the shortlist, I think. But we will see who the overall winner is. In fact, I'll put it on screen right now. This is the book that won, because right now I don't know, but future me who's editing this will know, so we'll see. Maybe I was right, maybe I've made a complete tit of myself on the internet by getting this totally wrong, but who knows? Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I also hope that you tuned in for the live stream, and if you didn't, you can catch up anytime right now on my channel. Thank you to the Booker Prize for trusting me with hosting the live stream. I appreciate it so much. I'm very nervous right now, but fingers crossed it all goes to plan, and I'm really, really excited. That's my overall emotion, is just, I'm just honored to be involved in this because I love the Booker Prize. I am a Booker super fan, as you know. Also, make sure you follow me on Instagram for all of the behind the scenes from the awards. And this was really fun. I definitely want to do this again, reading all of the books on the shortlist. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. All the best, stay in touch, and I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.